It's actually not too bad, surprisingly.
Yeah, and these mics will do a great job of keeping up with that, so I'm fine with that.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. All right, well, just in general, we'll just keep it fairly informal, and we'll just talk about NETGEAR and
stuff.
BirdDog and NDI stuff for a few minutes.
Yeah, great.
Go through things and see how it goes.
Excellent.
So thanks for coming. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
You're the first official podcaster, video podcaster, so we're really fortunate to have you here. But it's been good, and we've already been kind of connected over email and what have you since, for a while now, I guess.
Yeah.
I was telling you earlier, I was working with some guys from France and getting this whole booth set up for NETGEAR, and so you guys have been a big partner when it comes to NDI. Actually, you've been one of the only networking partners.
That's even better.
Yeah, exactly. Get out in front of it for as long as you can.
Yes, exactly.
So yeah, let me tell you what I love about the NETGEAR stuff, and then you can fill in the blanks. I've said for a long time that somebody, network company, needs to get on board and get the AV market taken seriously. And waiting for other companies to do this seemed to be almost like a dream. And then one day, NETGEAR comes along with their AV line switches and basically just says, okay, we're going to have an NDI profile just like you have for other profiles. And, this will make it super easy for customers to interact with.
Definitely.
So we can go over booth stuff later. But tell me, so how long have you guys been thinking of doing this and implementing this, and give us a little backstory as to NETGEAR's plan for all this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, everybody knows NETGEAR from the consumer side, and people still have those little blue switches around somewhere, little 6-port.
Yep.
So we've known switching for many years, of course. Our product line manager, who based in Paris, Laurent Massia, I call him the father of Pro AV at NETGEAR. He was the one seeing our M4300 switches being used in various applications. That more IT standard switch, IT looking switch.
Right.
And then he realized there's something else we should be doing for the marketplace and making it easier for people. So he's the one who really came together with the idea. And when I started at NETGEAR in October of 2019, I gathered together a group of integrators and consultants, people who are working with this stuff already as a group, like a dozen of them. And they came into NETGEAR when we could actually meet in person. In our HQ, and we picked their brains. We showed them what we're thinking of, and they're like, that's great. It's got to be simple. It's got to be easy to use. We're AV people, not IT people.
Right.
And they need to have things, have some assistance. So that's when it really came together. And we were thinking, number one, it's going to look different, which is cool. Look good in an AV rack. Ports in the back, not the front. You can turn it around if you want to.
Yeah, you can configure it either way.
Yeah. Threaded hole in the bottom, threaded hole in the front. Things like that to mount it on a truss.
So what is the threaded hole in the front? This is a question I've had for a long time. I haven't seen it used. But is there a specific mount for a network rack that will do the threaded hole, or is that just for it's a certain thread that you can use to hold it in a certain place?
Exactly, the latter. It's a generic sort of thread count that people can use for a truss, for a concert or something like that.
Yeah.
So those little sort of things put in there. But really what we realized in the last couple of years is that AV interface.
Yeah.
It is groundbreaking. I was talking to somebody else in another company earlier. He's like, it really is groundbreaking. This is awesome.
Agreed.
And it is just putting an interface in front of everything else.
Yeah.
So these switches have the command line. They have the IT interface, all the web, all the menus. You can do it that way if you want. It's not like we're dumbing down the switch.
Right.
And that's a key point. It's just making it easier. So you select a profile. I'm doing NDI. Are you doing NDI 4 with Dante or NDI 5, QSYS, whatever it is.
Right.
Click on the profile, select the ports you were going to use with it. And basically you're done. That's it.
So, when I was setting it up with, my friends from Paris, your guys, they basically said look, you just click, and then he was like, and then you're finished. And I was like, well, hang on.
Really?
There's I gotta set it up for multicast. And he's like, no, I did all that for you on the programming side instead of you needing to go through and know all of that. So he's like, you're ready to go as it is right now. So it gave us a lot of flexibility when we were designing the booth here, because we asked to partner with you guys basically for this show to figure out hey, we want to showcase the NETGEAR stuff because you are the protocol for the NDI thing. But you have that already. It's supposed to simplify the network and all that sort of thing. So it was made a lot of sense, but I had to sit down and get my networking brain around the fact that it was it actually isn't that complicated. It doesn't need to be that complicated.
Doesn't need to be. It is complicated.
Yeah, it can be.
It can be.
I think that's also one of the scary things about networking, and when we're talking about NDI, that's keeping people at bay from like really jumping in and like making the transition over is the networking side of things. Because I'm a firm believer that cameras are beautiful, you know, they do their thing, they have these huge sensors, but like if they don't ship across the network correctly, then what's the point? Like you got to get the packets from point A to point B, and it's got to be done intuitively, but then it also needs to kind of be accessible for the customer. And so those are all like advanced options, except for the last thing is, and everybody needs to be able to use it.
Yeah.
And so that seems to me like a big key with the NETGEAR stuff, especially the 4250 line, which is what we're currently using, to make it all kind of sing correctly.
Yep. And that's what we're seeing across all different kind of verticals. So if you're in a house of worship, you may be a volunteer that has some experience in technology, but you don't know how to configure a switch.
Right.
We can help you with that. You may be a corporate engineer. You may be an integrator who's done this for your life, and you do know how to program a switch. But this is make sure everything's done. You know, you don't have to follow the 12-page booklet and go to 18 different menus, because you might have just set something up incorrectly. It might have been rushed or something. Here it's all done. And it isn't just our word for it. You know, we get BirdDog cameras.
Yep.
And you guys get our switches, and we both make sure on both sides, make sure that it's going to work correctly.
Right.
That every little thing is set up correctly. So
yeah, it's funny because I didn't think I would get like the lead technician when I submitted my question, but I totally did, and that was impressive. You know, and as time goes along, more and more knowledge you get. You know, I'm a big believer, and a lot of people know you from your NETGEAR videos that you've done for, you know, that are up on YouTube or up on social media and stuff. But I'm a firm believer for a very long time, ever since I have worked for BirdDog, that the being able to get a sophisticated product, which the 4250 is, and the 4300 for that matter, and be able to set it up on your own is pretty critical to like the success, like the long-term success of implementing these systems. And so you're right, like house of worship folks, guys that are volunteers, you know, community groups, government agencies.
Yep.
They go to google.com and they type in like NETGEAR 4250 NDI setup, and up pop multiple videos from NETGEAR and from BirdDog saying, here's how you do it, here's how we think it should be done, and you know the best way to make that happen. And as time goes along, obviously more and more of that stuff gets produced, but it seems like right out of the gates when the NDI 5 profile hit, you guys had 2 or 3 like setups like, hey, click these buttons and you're good to go.
Well,
and start plugging things
and you
in.
talk about all the videos out there. We've all watched YouTube videos, and it can be 100 different videos.
Right.
The great thing about these is it's a minute and a half.
Yep.
You're done. That's it. That's the setup. It took more for me to figure out how to take out the ring on my washer, the little gasket on there. You know, it took an hour video. I'm stopping, starting. This, you watch it really quickly and you got it. There's more to it than that,
right?
For sure. And you mentioned our design team, and that's the other cool part that we always want to talk about. Credit those guys because they're awesome. These are higher level support techs who have known IT for years and years, and now they're learning all the AV business. In fact, one of the guys, they're at the show here, one of the guys I was walking with today said, you know, John, this has really been fun. I'm learning all this AV stuff. And last year, he was at Infocom, October to here. I've learned so much about AV. This is really fun. It's actually given me a new life at NETGEAR, because this is new applications for them. And so they're learning all the AV ins and outs and the IT ins and outs. They can help you figure it out. They've been through these problems before. Yeah. And it's a free service. You know, it's just, it doesn't cost anything. Pro AV Design at netgear.com. I got to give them a plug.
Yeah, absolutely. And by all means, use the platform to do that. Yeah, I really do love that. I run support on my side of the BirdDog company. And so, like you said, like coming to shows like this and hearing about what people are using the products for kind of gives you a new appreciation for, like, you know, all the different avenues that they can be used for. At the end of the day, though, again, I'm such a huge believer that the network side of things is just as crucial. And so I love the fact that you guys have the profiles built in, that they're constantly being refined. Again, conversations with NETGEAR, and they're like, oh yeah, we've got that. That's coming up soon, or we're coming out with these things, and that will just help the customer have a better experience. And so at the end of the day, when people come to us and they're like, we're going to buy a fleet of these, I usually stop them and say, okay, tell me about the network, because I want you to have a great experience, but I want it to work perfectly. And if you're going to go to a big box store and buy a $40 switch, the performance that you're hoping for is not, you know, what you're going to get. And so doing something like a NETGEAR 4250 and knowing even then, like, you can expand it. And in brief, I'll kind of talk generally about my design with this booth and how you guys helped with that.
Cool.
So I had a quick conversation. with our allies over in France, and basically said, here's what I want to do. I want everything to come back to a core switch, which is fiber, and we're going to have these pods or these islands around our booth. And so what I was thinking was I was going to have 1 or 2 switches at each of these pods, and I was going to have like a centralized network cabinet. And in the network cabinet was going to be a fiber switch and another 4250, and then at each of the desks, one small, the first level, 4250 that would do 10 gig, SFP plus. So they said, okay, yeah, that sounds great. Tell us what you're thinking. I gave them all the specs. They said everything looks fine in that regard. And what they really liked, apart from spanning tree, was they really liked the fact that everything went back to a centralized location, and that the switches, which I didn't realize until I started getting into this with them, was you plug them in fiber and it will auto lag those lines.
Yeah.
So that's something I don't have to configure. And then if you are going into a lesser switch, so a 1 gig, for example, it will auto trunk those lines.
Yeah.
And so it will recognize automatically. So no longer, so we come out of the fiber core, we're doing dual fibers to each of the main switches in each of the pods. Those ones automatically get recognized by the core switch that, nope, those are lags, done. I didn't have to configure that. And then when I took an Ethernet cable out of that switch and into the secondary switch that's under the desk, it did the auto trunk right there. And I plugged it in and watched it do it.
Cool.
And when I discussed it with them, they were like, just give it about a minute and a half to sort itself out, and then go in and set up your profiles. So that's all I did, and I'm using the core switch as the DHCP to govern the two, to govern all of the IP addresses and everything like that. And then I just push that same profile on all of the switches and pick the ones I want. Man, like from a networking standpoint, it couldn't have been easier. Like, it makes total sense in my brain why it's mapped out that way, but I can explain it to a customer then who's not network savvy, and I can just say, like, look, the profiles are done. Update it to the latest firmware, which is just a firmware download.
Easy.
Update it, and then you're good to go.
Yeah.
So I went like way overboard with the network here, just because I thought, all right, let's make this thing work really well and show the high-end capabilities of it, but then how simple, when I'm implementing a very sophisticated network, show how simple it is that can be done. So I was really impressed. I love the fact the way that it turned out. I spent a couple of hours plugging things in. I probably spent more time physically running fiber cables through the booth than actually configuring switches and that sort of thing. But
nice. Yeah,
it did seem to start working. And my favorite thing is it's all governed over here on this side of the booth. And I plug devices in over there, and they all get the right IPs.
Just pops in.
They just, as long as you put it at the right port, it's all good to go. And so, I'm really impressed with the product so far. I think it's the right answer when it comes to customers looking for, what's the way to do NDI. The 4250, as of today, is the way to do it because it's pretty much done for you.
That's great to hear, John. Thank you for that.
Yeah, we're really excited. Thank you so much. I know that you guys have been talking to our team as well.
Oh, yeah.
And so making sure that that's correct. But you've had conversations with other players like New Tech and the NDI team and all those guys too. So it isn't somebody developing it in their garage, their profile. It's like it's a collaboration and a friendship and a partnership with several big players in the NDI realm.
Exactly.
And so that's how we know that we can rely on it and that it's supported, which is my favorite part, because there's a place you can call if you got a question, or there's an email you can send and they will respond. It happened to me.
Yep. It's a group email, and we have people based around the world.
Yeah.
So if you're at a weird time zone somewhere, we will actually pick it up in a couple hours usually, or less.
Yeah.
As you know, you used it.
Yep. Yeah, and I can attest that it actually worked. And I just had like networking questions. At the end of the day, I was just like, so I don't have to get into the back end and do all this other stuff.
Yeah.
And no, you're good.
Which is good. You want the confirmation because auto features. Sometimes people are like, I don't know,
right?
Especially if you've done it before.
Right.
But the cool thing is you can let the auto lag, auto trunk work in the AV GUI, but log into the other GUI and see what it did then.
Yeah.
So you can kind of learn that way. If you're trusting it, great. And you don't know what's going on, great. Well, then go in the other way around and see what actually happened, so you understand those settings.
Yeah. So for the nerdy folks that may be watching this, so things like the query or delegation and stuff like that, where it does a little bit based on IP address, but if you're setting up your core switch, you usually set it at one of the lower numbers, and it figures it out as to what the query or where that should be delegated. And so that's exactly what happened. I basically plugged them all in, fired them up one at a time. I gave it some time to think it through, but fired them all up, and then went back to the core switch. And of course it had been delegated because everything comes back to the core. And the reason why I really like that design is because it's only 2 hops. So it goes back to the core and then to the other pod. So you're not doing spanning tree where you're coming from pod 3 to pod 2 to pod 1, back to the core, back to pod 2. You're not doing this link thing, but instead you're going from the pod to the core and then to wherever the destination is, and it's only ever 2 steps, and so it's really fast. And the switches figured it out automatically who's in charge.
I love that. And you can alter that if you need to.
Yeah, you can force it.
By default, it's the lowest IP address, right? But there's in the software, in the easy software too, there's a way to change that pretty easily.
Yeah.
So we're adding more and more features that weren't in the AV GUI to begin with, because you might need to make a change.
Right.
And we made it, I think, too simple the first level out maybe, and people had to go back to the editor interface for a few things. So as those are happening, we're bringing it back out. So this is an evolving process for sure. Well,
and it really, inventing things is always going to be like, oh, and we'll add that later, or we'll get that up in the next iteration. And so it's, that is the nature of the beast. We are literally inventing, the protocol was invented, we're inventing the products, and you guys are figuring out how to ship the packets. And so it's like, it's
teamwork.
It's pretty cool when you step back and you look at it all kind of working together. And especially today, if you come to the booth at NAB, you can see it in real time working, where we have sources going. It's just a flat VLAN, really. We thought about segregating them and like putting them in little pods, or like separating them with groups or in separate VLANs or all that stuff. And at the end of the day, we're like, you know what? Let's just see how it goes. And so far, so good.
You don't need to. You can if you want. If you're that kind of anal, or you want to organize things. And you can. That's fine. Not a problem. But you don't have to. And for a lot of simple situations, you don't need to. That's overcomplicating it.
Right.
So don't bother.
Well, a lot of the problem was like, okay, so we're going to have a whole bunch of sources on a single network, and so when you do a search, you're going to get 40 sources or whatever. But at the end of the day, there's basically a design team, and so they know which ones are which. We know what IPs they have. So you can micromanage it as much as you want. It's really not that difficult, where you can separate them into different. It could have VLANs per table, and that would have done it as well. But then it would have really separated it, where then we'd have to make exceptions. And so I thought, let's just keep it simple. That's kind of how the profiles are designed anyways. And let's see how it goes and see how it performs. And I haven't had any network, but we had I was done a day early, and all of my networking stuff got delivered a day late. And so I lost almost a day and a half of working, but I was still done early, just to get it going. It's because the profiles work, and it really is. It does make sense how to do it. So I'm excited for NETGEAR's future, because I know you guys are up to some cool stuff over there.
We are, definitely. I was going to bring a show and tell, but I wasn't able to pull it away from the booth. Everybody's like, I want to see that.
It's probably in high demand.
Yeah, exactly. And still prototype at this point. We're looking at Q3 for some of these new products. So what we heard from the council to begin with in 2019 was they want a smaller desktop version. So we got the other 11 models out first of the 4250. So we're announcing 2 new desktop size models of the 4250 line. Same AV GUI, all the same principles. It has the same paint, even though they're small enough. They don't have a front and back, really. It's just all the ports on one side. A little bit of VESA plate mounting holes on the bottom, or mounting points on the bottom.
Really?
So you can do that. So you can stick it behind a monitor, under a desk or whatever. But it's a couple of 10-port switches, 8 main ports, and you got 2 for uplinks.
Okay.
One has SFP port. The other one has 2 SFP plus ports.
Oh, nice.
So you can do a 10 gig uplinks on there. What else about them? They're kind of just, they have little flanges, mounting flanges on the sides, on the edges if you want to mount them somewhere. So those are going to be in really high demand, I know, coming up.
So these are smaller than a traditional 1U switch.
Correct.
They're designed for sitting on a desktop or being mounted somewhere else that's perhaps doesn't have a network rack.
Correct. Yeah, they're like that big?
Yeah.
I should have brought it. Like that big.
No, it's all good.
But
I like it. I know that now NETGEAR traditionally has all sorts of, like you guys have had different sizes of switches for ages.
Yes.
But this, for small install, and I'm always going back to house of worship, schools, all of those. Like, this is the perfect piece, especially if it has the horsepower and the brains that the 4250 series already has.
All the same software, same firmware, It's just smaller form factor. That's it. We really depopulated some of the bigger ones, took a few ports out, but everything else is all the same inside.
Right.
So that's really cool. So on top of that, then we talked a bit earlier about the AV GUI and the software and everything else, trying to make things easier and discovering switches. So right now the software is built into the 4250s.
Right.
But NETGEAR has all these other switches too, 4300 switches.
Yeah.
That started out this Pro AV push, really, 1 gig and 10 gig switches. So people wanted that GUI to control and configure those switches. Well, they don't have the room inside of them because they were designed a while ago.
Yeah.
So what we're doing is we're coming out with a portable, really simple software program. So it's the NETGEAR Engage controller, and that is a way to get the AV GUI on a little USB stick, plug it into your laptop. You can run it off of there. No app to download.
Right.
No fancy installation stuff. And what this does is bring a lot of those AV GUI features plus a lot more to all your 4250 and 43 switches.
Oh, wow.
So you can do things like firmware updates across multiple switches. We'll go find your network, find your switches for you. So you don't have to figure out what IP address it is either. That's always a
in the
problem.
data realm, there was a program like that before. If people are familiar with NETGEAR switches, that you used to do, like have an auto discovery function or something like that. Is that right?
Yeah, there was an NMS, network management system.
That's right. Yeah,
it's just not used as much, really. It's a different beast.
Okay.
And that wasn't optimized for AV users. It didn't have the profiles, didn't have all that stuff.
Right. Well, and as an integrator, once you get comfortable with something, you tend to buy it again. And so that's what I'm like ultimately excited about. Is it's getting. First of all, you guys are refining it better and better and better to where people can walk into a space and they can say, I want to do a podcast booth, or I want to do a small studio or a church or whatever. And it's a scalable option, first of all. So the network isn't overcomplicated. We can add as many endpoints, cameras, converters, whatever we need on the network, and it all works and talks together. And there's not like some sort of lofty threshold that you're going to hit where it's like, oh, well, now we need to upgrade all these switches to something bigger. It just definitely expands and keeps going. So that's really exciting. I love the fact that when I first started, there was not much conversation about the network stuff, and I was thinking we really should be talking about the network, and now we're talking about the network a lot.
Oh yeah.
And it's being done at a high caliber level, and so I'm really excited about NETGEAR and you guys, what you're doing over there.
We're excited too. This is really fun for us to be here at NAB, and with good partners like BirdDog. It just makes it even more fun because we're in this together. We're all trying to make it easier for everybody. And together we are, and making a difference, and that's really cool.
Yeah, making it accessible is really where I think that's where it'll really take off, because as soon as people know how to do it, then it'll be we'll be in good shape. Well, look, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you coming over to the booth and hanging out. It's great to meet you in person and now I already had a face to a name, but it's nice to shake your hand.
A live face, that's different. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me over, John.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us. And we will be continuing to continue that network conversation long into the future. So
absolutely. Look forward to it.
Awesome. Take care.
Right.
We'll see you later. We'll see you another time, I guess.
All right.
Next podcast booth.
I'll be there.
Sounds good. All right. Take it easy. Thanks, guys.